Hello and welcome back to America Right Now. I'm Tom Basili. Coming up in this final hour, the Justice Department releasing pages upon pages of thick black lines, otherwise known as the heavily redacted version of the affidavit, which led to the FBI's stunning raid on former President Trump's Lago home. Did the government meet their burden for the search warrant? Plus, the fentanyl crisis coming across the southern border is killing thousands. Democrats remaining silent on the tragedy. How do we protect our children and our communities? Then, fresh off the Inflation Reduction Plan, the Biden administration wants to spend hundreds of billions at the potential cost of even $1 trillion to pay for people's student loans. Is it nothing more than a tax deferred? And we'll introduce you to our Patriots of the Week, whose mission is to place rescued pups who have been trained as service dogs with veterans in need. But first, the release of the redacted affidavit yesterday, yielding frustration and a lot more questions about the process, the facts, and where this all goes. Let's break down what we learned with distinguished university professor and legal analyst Thane Rosenbaum. Professor, good to see you as always. Appreciate you being here. You and I have gone through this from cover to cover. From what you've read, did the government meet their burden, however low that burden may be, for a search warrant?
Well, Tom, as you and I both know, there's so much redacted, it's not really clear what the magistrate heard as the argument that was contained in the affidavit itself to justify the search. We really don't know. So what we do know, I think, in that he released such a heavily redacted document is that perhaps the case is being made that the redactions themselves, the degree of them, so much, is a presumption of guilt. Right? That because the whole thing is blacked out, it shows you how serious this is, which is why you see these high-end classifications like FISA and human confidential sources and no foreign sharing, as if to say, all we have to do is use those codes and that will tell you how serious it is. But we don't have to do anything else in and we don't have to meet our burden because there's nothing to show you other than blacked out versions of an affidavit.
Now, Merrick Garland says, look, there was no choice but to do this way. From what we've learned, what the Biden DOJ is saying, is it credible? Because we now have a timetable. This goes back now almost a year. Do you think that, from what we know now, that what the Biden DOJ is saying is credible?
Well, of course, it's not, because they haven't brought charges yet, right? This is all so unprecedented. You don't actually show the affidavit for the warrant and the search before you even file charges. We don't even know what the president is charged with. There is an intimation there that what this is really about is obstruction, right? What does obstruction look like, Tom? The president commingled classified documents with newspaper articles and magazines and personal notes. So that's really mishandling. They use language like unauthorized retention, unlawful concealment, unlawful removal. For God's sakes, Tom, when you invoke the Espionage Act, you're not talking about retention and removal. Right. You're talking about Julian Assange, Edward Snowden.
Using it against the United States. Intentionally using it against the United States.
Disseminating it, destroying it, showing it to foreign enemies. That's what applies to low-level government employees, not the president of the United States who left office and had a possessory interest in the documents to begin with. If you're going to use the heavy language of Espionage Act, Tom, I think you got to come back with something more than removal and retention. I think you have to start using words like unlawful sharing with foreign entities and possible destruction. You don't put a president of the United States in jail simply for improper handling and commingling documents with newspaper articles.
Yeah, I've noted that the Trump side of this has not been made public. The former president has lashed out at the judge. He's lashed out at DOJ. And there's a communication in here from the DOJ to Donald Trump's lawyers, but they redacted the Trump attorney's correspondence. Do you think that Trump should release that communication to maybe help clear some of this up, maybe give us a little bit more of a flavor for what the back and forth was on this?
Well, you notice at the end, Tom, also they discussed another letter that was sent that they have. And I thought that's what, as a lawyer, Brady material, as if they were suggesting that there might be some exculpatory material there that goes to the point that I know you've been making for a week, which is the president has the right to declassify documents. And in fact, he may have, in fact, done that here. So I think you're right. I think that the president really, since he's had no objection to sharing the affidavit in the first instance, he should just release as much as he knows that's out there to once again demonstrate, I might have had this document. I might have already declassified it. Maybe I didn't declassify it. But under the Presidential Records Act, it's not a crime. These documents took place during my presidency.
Yeah.
And if I inadvertently took it with me, that's the worst thing you have on me, by the way, by the FBI that seems to have dedicated itself for the last 6 years to do nothing but investigate me.
Right. Now, Professor, just real quick, 15 seconds. Talk to us about the process now going forward. This is not going away. This is going to be an albatross around his neck, unfortunately, for a long time, because there are questions of fact here. And ultimately, those things have to be adjudicated by a court. Just real quick, what's the next step in all of this?
Tom, so much of this appears political that they can just not bring charges and let this just hang over the president's head to compromise his ability to either rerun for political life office or other Republicans, right? Because prosecutors don't like to have cases blow up in their face. And I'm just not sure they have evidence here to bring charges in front of a federal court. So maybe it's their advantage to do nothing but continue the investigation and not bring charges.
Yeah, or just indict him, and then once it goes to court, by that time, the political damage is already done. But I got to leave it there, unfortunately. Professor Thane Rosenbaum, always appreciate your insights, sir.
Thank you, Tom.